Welcome to X-Men 97, Episode 6 of Cyclops is Waiting for Me, an X-Men animated recap podcast. I'm Rod. I just whisked through Hollywood traffic in record time, so I'm proud to be here with 4 seconds to spare.
And I'm JC. I'm very proud of Rod for that. And because it is a Storm-centric episode, I wanted to make sure Rod was the host on this one. But before we get into all that, I want to introduce our guest, Chris Riley.
Hello, everybody. I am Chris Riley, the co-host of X Reads an X-Men Experience podcast, as well as the co-founder of the Uncanny Experience, an immersive X-Men fan convention.
And we're going to get a little bit more into that in just a few moments. We got some rigmarole to get through. So, Rod?
Cyclops is Waiting for Me is our weekly podcast series where we go back and watch every single X-Men animated episode we can find. This podcast started with the original 1992 X-Men the animated series, building up to this moment, the release of X-Men 97, for me specifically, this episode.
Some quick reminders. We're a recap show about an episode that aired less than 1 week ago. There are going to be spoilers. If you don't want it spoiled for you, pause the podcast, watch the episode, come back. We are not sponsored or affiliated with Marvel, Marvel Animation, Disney, or Disney Plus, or even Hulu in any way.
And don't forget to follow us on social media at Cyclops IWFM Pod on Instagram, TikTok, Threads, X, and Facebook. And of course, make sure to follow us on all your favorite podcast services.
But before we get into the episode, like I was alluding to, Chris, tell us about the Uncanny Experience.
Well, the Uncanny Experience is an immersive X-Men fan convention that takes place in Minneapolis, Minnesota. This year, it's the weekend of September 28th and 29th. And what we do is we take over the Minneapolis Club, which looks just like Xavier's Institute, and we transform it into the Mutant School. So when you're walking through the doors, you get to live out your mutant fantasies. There's a cosplay contest, a vendor hall. We have celebrity guests, the stars and creators of the X-Men universe. We have specialized classes that are taught by industry experts in mutant history, and a lot of the classes are taught by our cosplay guests. So it's like when you go to a class, it's like you're getting taught by Storm herself. You're getting taught by Cyclops. This is our second year, our sophomore year. There's a lot of great memories and experiences that people can get when coming to this event.
And I know not everybody has been announced for this year, but who have been some of the people that have come in the past and been a part of this?
Well, last year we had Lenore Zahn, the voice of Rogue in X-Men the Animated Series, as well as Cal Dodd, the voice of Wolverine, Daniel Cudmore, who played Colossus in the X-Men live-action films, legendary comic book writer Chris Claremont. And this year, we have Allison Seeley Smith, the voice of Storm. We have George Buza, the voice of Beast from X-Men, the Animated Series in X-Men 97. And Chris Claremont's returning. We also have Gail Simone, who is the new writer on the Uncanny X-Men, the first female writer in the 700-issue history of Uncanny X-Men. So it's pretty monumental. And Leah Williams is coming. We have a whole slew of guests.
That's awesome. What I heard the most that stands out, though, is now Rod is going to be figuring out when he can do a trip to Minneapolis. He's going to be like, yeah, we can't record this week, John. I don't know why.
All right. Well, if you come, you got to come in cosplay. Which character would you be?
Oh, man. That's a good question. Yeah. I normally don't cosplay, but like my favorite character is Storm. Maybe I could figure a variation on that. You know,
do a gender bent Storm or something.
Yeah. Or fuck it, maybe you'll see me in a brassiere. You don't know.
Awesome. If you don't want to do a specific character, we do have a whole fashion line of student uniforms. So you can come in a Xavier Institute physical education outfit. There's now cheerleaders and Morlocks and Hellfire Club attire. So there's something for everybody.
I feel like in the real mutant world, I would end up being like a Morlock. Like I wouldn't be able to go to the private institute to learn my abilities. Like you just find me in the sewer and be like, okay, he's there.
If you haven't noticed from any of our episodes, Chris, Rod is a little bit self-deprecating. So,
to be honest.
Well, that's awesome. Love to hear that you're doing that, and glad to hear the first event was such a success that you were able to bring it back and do it again, especially like in a year where we've seen a decrease in sometimes the number of people who are going to cons and participating in them. It's awesome to see a new one start to pop up. And I know you guys are calling it an experience and not a convention, so I know it is a little bit different, but it's great to see that this immersive scenario is going that well for y'all. So
yeah, thank you. It's been great.
Are you going to have someone dressed up as a demented owl, like preying on your insecurities?
Oh my gosh, we are now. Thank you for that idea. Maybe that's going to be me.
Those are what we call teenage girls.
I was going to suggest some of the trolls from some of these Facebook groups, but either way. Anyway, now onto the show. Today we're going to be talking about season 1, episode 6, titled Life Death Part 2. It aired on April 17th, 2024, and currently sits at an 8.1 star rating on IMDb. And this was interesting because nothing was going to live up to Remember It, right?
No, I think Remember It is lightning in a bottle, and this was still a really, really good episode, but I don't envy having to do the episode that followed Remember It.
Luckily, they started it completely differently, so there was not even a comparison.
Right.
So they opened the episode with the previously on being Storm, or Allison Seeley Smith, of course, or I guess, well, that was more of a Storm voice than Adversary voice. And there's the recap essentially, and feel free to add on to anything I might miss here, was essentially everything that happened in Genosha in the last episode, reminding us of the Phoenix stuff, and then goes into the intro. Did I miss anything on that?
Well, they did the Adversary reveal. Right. They showed the bite, and then it ended with the whole is this death in the previously on.
That's right. So, they recapped the Life Death Part 1. Okay.
And almost as much time as they gave to the original Life Death.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Chris, I don't know if you heard when we watched Life Death Part 1, we were like, oh, maybe they split this with Motendo because the Life Death story was so long that they had to split off 15 minutes. The whole Life Death story could have happened in 1 half-an-hour block. I'm glad they didn't, though. I mean, it was better to have the suspense between.
Right.
I mean, as far as the overall format of inserting life, death, and having it cut back and forth between the other storyline, which we'll get into with Professor X, I did not like it. I thought it took me out of the world. This particular episode was I loved it. It was great, but I really thought it would have been a better service to the viewers if they just did a 15-minute slot of Storm and do her story, and then a 15-minute slot of Professor Xavier instead of having to jump back and forth. I felt like Storm was overshadowed.
Yeah, I that was the biggest critique I had for it, is it felt like it was a 60-40 with the Xavier story compared to the Storm story. And I understand because they wanted to show certain similarities in narrative kind of happening at the same time and stuff like that. But I would have preferred if it was the opposite. Let Storm be the 60%, not the 40% on it. But I mean, it's kind of one of those hindsight's 2020 possibly. But I agree with you. I would have rather had, if you have to do the back and forth, give me more Storm. That's how I would have wanted to see it. So
always more Storm. Always.
Yes. Yeah, that's what JC and we were texting as soon as the episode was over, at 12:31 a.m. Oh man, it was great seeing Xavier again, but why now? We were waiting for this Storm redemption arc. I almost, and I'm not a writer, so I don't want to tell them how to do their jobs, but I almost would have loved to seen it how they did the Savage Land in the original series, where we lived with it longer. Because I mentioned on a previous episode, I would have watched an entire series of just Storm and Forge living together in the desert and the stuff they went through. I'm also a little biased.
You are biased. So then it hops into the intro, and what we expected to happen did, where both Magneto and Gambit were removed from the title cards. But then we got the surprise title card, which I was not expecting, and still to this moment doesn't make sense for the full context of the episode, with Nightcrawler being officially in the title right now. So, and
he just replaced Gambit because he was running next to Rogue in that group shot.
Oh yeah, in the group running shot.
Yeah.
We also don't have Roberto with a title card either, and I'm assuming that's because technically he's not fully a member of the team yet. He hasn't gotten his code name or anything like that. But I was just a little bit shocked to have Nightcrawler just being oh, he's a team member right now. It's okay.
We find out next episode Sunspot has left because he saw everything that happened there his first week.
It's I'm out. The whole Magneto and Gambit thing being gone made me so sad, but the Nightcrawler thing made me so happy. I was so conflicted. Oh, there's so many emotions that run through our minds when we see these opening credits, right, guys?
Yep. And then there was a new reveal that happened in there that made me start to question all the theories and stuff. Chris, you're obviously an expert with all things that come across for X-Men. What were your thoughts on the shot of Nimrod standing in Master Mold, which was a brand new shot that wasn't referenced in any previous episode that existed in that title sequence?
Are we allowed to say curse words?
Oh, we swear all the fucking time.
Oh my fucking lord, shit's gonna go down. That's all I thought when I'm all oh, it's Nimrod. Shit's gonna go down.
Right. And that also kind of lends itself to some of the theories that have been going around since the Bastion picture was shown in Life Death Part 1, because Bastion is a combination of Nimrod and Master Mold. So if that's an illusion, it's like, if you know, you know, and most people aren't going to get that. But those of us who've lived in the comics our entire lives, we're like, oh, like to your point, shit is going to go down.
And this is not even like a comic thing because I'm not very knowledgeable in the actual comics, but I mentioned to JC at Scum and Villainy. By the way, everybody listening, all three of us watched this episode again at Scum and Villainy with the bar full of drunk nerds.
Shout out to you, Chris, along with Kevin Winston from Digital LA, for putting on those watch parties for us to attend and meet some of the voice stars. So
it's a lot of fun to do those. The voice actors love viewing the show with the fans. They get to hear the excitement, the screams, the shock and awe from the energy of the crowd, and they keep coming back week after week. And there's a lot of time when you're in Scum and Villainy and you're actually next to other voice actors and you don't even know it because they're in the audience too. They're not in the Q&A, but they're there to support and have fun, and also also crew members. So, if you're there at Scum and Villainy, be sure to, mosey around and talk to people and say hello, because you never know who you're going to meet and see there.
Oh, yeah. We were chatting with David, who's the voice actor who has done like Mojo as Gladiator in this episode, and Banshee and Leech. And I think he has the most roles of anybody in the series. Like, it's incredible how much he's done. He was awesome.
You guys are in for a treat, because next Wednesday we have Isaac, who plays Bishop, coming in.
We got to interview Isaac. He was actually on our first episode of our offshoot Xavier Files show. So that'll be great to get to meet him. So this comes out on a Monday. So literally 2 days later is when Isaac will be there at Scum. So that's great.
And if you don't live in LA and you just can't make it out there, usually Sunspot is live streaming.
Yes.
The thing. So if you want to catch it, just follow Guy on Instagram.
Yeah, Guy's Instagram is going during the Q&A usually. So
what I was going to say was, I mentioned to JC last night while we were watching this, without knowing too much about the actual comics and stuff, I feel like they've shown Apocalypse and the Phoenix stuff in the intro so many times now that has to be like a heavy hint of what is happening in the background of all this stuff that obviously we're going to talk about today. And also one like minor note, the intro to the song changed this week again. There's a little, I like how there's the visual changes, but there's like these little like audio nods that they're playing around with. And also, we'll talk about when it gets there, but Storm has a score now officially. It's amazing.
I adore the Newton brothers, the composers for X-Men 97. I think I just read an article that said they wrote 8 different opening credit sequences.
Yeah, and it sounded like there were eight different ones that we didn't hear, right? I don't know, they're doing a great job with everything. It's, as I've mentioned before, I'm biased. I would love to see Ron back on the show. But the Newton brothers are definitely holding their own with just all the variety of score they're giving everybody.
I want to give some love to Ron too. You guys' Cyclops is Waiting for Me theme song is so cool. Like, I listened to it like 3 times because I was rocking out to it, like when I was listening to the last episode. So, kudos to Ron and his amazing talent, and what an amazing theme song you have for this pod.
Yeah, me and Ron actually wrote that together. It was fun. I was like having an out-of-body experience when we'd been friends for a little while, but then we actually like wrote something together. I was like,
it's so cool.
He sends back notes. He's like, sounds great, Ron. I'm like, what? But then he made it. You could ask JC. He heard the original like demos and then what Ron did to it. And, like, there's a reason Ron Wasserman is who Ron Wasserman is.
I mean, it was great to begin with. Like, don't pretend that you didn't do something awesome. His punch-ups were fantastic, but you and him together working on that was fantastic. So
yeah, and we've worked on some more stuff since then. Hopefully we'll see the light of day if some executives would ever like the green light gonna subtweet some people out here.
Let's manifest that.
And then the only other thing of note from the intro was we did have a little bit of the One Man's Worth flashback where you showed Nimrod getting shot up by Bishop along with the alternate present day Wolverine and Storm. And then we did see the flashback to the debut of Lilandra, where she had the weird bug-eyed helmet on when she was psychically connecting with Xavier. And I never understood that helmet because, like, the whole thing with the Shi'ar is they're all, like, descended from birds. But it's like, it looks like a praying mantis's head. So I don't know if that means that after they, copulate the marriage that she's going to eat him. So,
Oh, my.
I mean, it's not far from what happened, or almost happened. Yeah, so to me, in my opinion, the opening of this episode felt most like 92 in 97. Just there's something about the grain of the visuals and stuff, and then seeing the Shi'ar attack the Kree and stuff, and just the way outer space looked. And even I recognized the Shi'ar ships, so that was cool. We're out in outer space, and we zoom in, and we see that Deathbird is attacking the Kree, and I was surprised to have recognized Ronan the Destroyer. It took a while.
Accuser.
Yeah, right. No, it's Drax is the Destroyer.
There you go.
That's why I'm not the comic expert on this show. But yeah, like, I guess I'm so locked into MCU Marvel. I'm like, he has the same hammer as Ronan. That is Ronan. Okay.
When they showed Ronan, I love that they went with the classic green color scheme too, because like, you know, when I started reading comics, like the MCU wasn't even a dream for most of us. So I love that they still kept the classic art style and character design and stuff like that. Real quick, I just got to point out, there are tons of people dying in that opening salvo. Like, they're just blowing up ships and people are exploding and they're just going for it with this. Like, they are appreciating the TV 14 age rating, is what I'll say. And then we get the reveal along with Deathbird is the Imperial Guard. And we're going to play our favorite game. Who are those characters?
Oh no, I knew you were going to say that.
So we
I'm horrible at the.
We will start with Rod, and then we'll go to you, Chris, to fill in for the rest.
The thing that sucks about this for me is that I literally know the answers from an episode about a year ago. Do I remember any of them? No. JC sent me a shot of a new person in that guard that I didn't even realize was new. But yeah, I'm gonna get all these wrong. There's like wait, was one of them Manta?
There is a Manta. Manta is one of them. Yep.
Because I was like, there's one that looks like a manta ray. Oh, that's Manta. And then a not giant man, but like that's what I can think of.
Chris, any guesses for you to fill in the rest?
Oh my gosh.
Okay, it's not just me. I'm feeling better now.
No, it's totally me, because like I literally was so transfixed about Deathbird. My eyes did not want to like wander from her, and I didn't want to think about anything else but her because she was so freaking amazing. I got nothing, you guys.
All right. Well,
I know there's a lot of like there's Kree in there.
So the other Imperial Guard, you got Starbolt, Titan, who's the big one, Earthquake, who's the one who looks like a gargoyle, Smasher, who I believe in the comics was a cannonball, married one of the Smashers or something like that, I want to say. And then Flashfire. But there was the reveal of a new member of the Imperial Guard, which is Vulcan, the third Summers brother.
Ah.
Yeah, that was the one where I sent Rod the picture and he was like, I have no idea who this is.
And then JC told me, and I was like, man, my first thought is Xavier's probably out there like, I crossed literal galaxies and I cannot get away from this fucking bloodline. The Summers family is always going to be a problem for him no matter where he goes.
Pretty much, yeah. And just wait, if they figure out the way to bring Maddie back to life, then we know Havoc has to eventually start hooking up with her. So
yeah, surprise.
That's true.
Totally not a shit show. Well, no, because in the comics, the relationship that Vulcan gets is actually with Deathbird. So,
and they called her Deathbird because they didn't name her in '92, right?
I don't remember, and you love to ask me questions I don't know off the top of my head.
I'm pretty sure someone who's listening, correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason I think that is because I remember them not saying it in the show, and I only knew her from the video game. And so they actually said her name in this. And Chris, you're right, she was animated so badass in this, and she was holding her own. She had like a guard with her, but she kind of really didn't need them, and she took down Ronan almost single-handedly.
Isn't this the part where she like sticks her heel in his cheek?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my god, TV-14.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, a messenger who I believe was also one of the voices of David, who played Mojo, comes in the room, is like, hey, gotta interrupt you. And she's like ready to freak out. And he's like, it's your sister. He's like, shit. So Ronan's on the ground, and that's where to hold him down, she's literally putting her heel through his cheek. And it's just, that was visceral, man. Like, it's one thing when you see somebody get like punched, but this was also like a few people had some like latent kink unlocked for them by seeing that, I'm pretty sure.
I would say that's one of those moments where you learn something about yourself one way or the other.
Yeah. You either really like it or you really don't like it.
Holly kind of leaned over to me and cracked a joke. She was all like, yeah, some people pay for that.
Do you guys remember the show Heroes?
Of course.
Yes, of course.
So Ali Larder's character had a very similar moment where she took the the point of the heel on some guy's temple, and I just like it kind of mirrored it. But I was like, am I learning something about myself right now? Anyway, yeah. So the messenger's like hollow message, or is a hollow globe? Is that what they called it later? Hollow something ends up being Lilandra, who is giving like a State of the Union. I guess.
Yeah, it was a full State of the Union to all the Shi'ar,
but about her upcoming marriage to a Terran, and all of us knew who this was going to be when they were, because she was like, we healed him and blah blah blah.
Well,
and
the important part of that is they literally say 1 year ago, so that means timeline wise this is November of 1997, because Xavier's death certificate is listed as November of 96, so we actually have like a timeline to follow.
And we're going to assume that as good of writers as these guys are, they're not like trying to work some like space-time dilation thing for us, like Interstellar.
No, I don't think they're trying to do that.
Yeah.
The comics, they've never really tried to do that because it would just get way too complicated.
And so that's the big reveal that, yes, Xavier is still alive. We still don't have the answer to if the X-Men know that or if they're covering it up or some combination of whatever. But the big surprise was that he was walking and he had this dumb-looking armor on.
Which that armor is authentic. Okay. And I've always hated the armor, so I'm not giving it a free pass because it's authentic. I want to say it was the Uncanny 275, I think is the number I saw on it today, that showed him wearing it. And Chris, did you ever read that run? Like the, Xavier's reveal of still being like fighting alongside them and stuff?
Not yet, but it's on my list.
Yeah, it was a pause period for me that I wasn't buying X-Men at that time. Because I didn't really buy X-Men until when I got back into comics. So,
well, when he came out, I literally for half a second had to process in my brain. Wait a minute, is that Lex Luthor from Superman? Are we getting like this weird like DC versus X-Men like crossover going on? Very reminiscent
DC
of him
wishes.
in his mech suit.
it definitely gave off mech suit vibes. Side note to date the podcast, today there was I think it was Scott Snyder had originally talked to Leonardo DiCaprio about playing Lex Luthor, and they put this awful Photoshop together of a bald Leonardo DiCaprio in the power suit, and it just made me laugh. It's absolutely terrible. I'll share it with you guys later.
That's so
My
funny.
gosh. Yeah. I mean, I guess he was Wolf of Wall Street, so he could be like a rich tycoon-y type, but
yeah,
nah.
But the big reaction of it all is the Shi'ar are all like, nobody's even hiding the fact that they're not happy about this. Like they're all like groaning and like eyes are shifting. Like, wait, what? She's gonna get with this guy?
I was kind of torn about that moment because I get what they're saying. They're like, we're in the middle of a war. This is not a great time to announce your marriage or whatever, or decide to get married as the leader of everything. Also, though, they were being kind of like galaxy racist or something. I don't know how you say.
You could just say racist.
Yeah, like cosmically racist.
Cosmically racist.
Yeah, because they're just like, ooh, a Terran. And it was the inflection on the word Terran. It just sounded like offensive.
I was actually talking about this in one of the Facebook groups. Like in the Marvel universe, basically every spacefaring race thinks like that about Earth. Like they are like, oh, you guys only figured out space travel within the last 50 years? What is wrong with you all? Like they literally think our species is just idiots, and debatable at certain times, but like, yeah, every space society hates Earthlings, basically.
Fair.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the big reveal, is that Lilandra's really the only one that approves of this, and not a single other Shi'ar that we saw liked it, let alone Deathbird. So then it transitions to Xavier and Lilandra talking in what I interpreted as gardens.
Yep.
What do you say? And Lilandra's feeding the plants? Is that what?
Yeah, they were feeding the plants. Yeah.
Happening.
But the thing that stood out right at the front of that is you start to see these other species, and it looks like it's very much like a caste system where these are the servants. And it's basically like anytime you see these horse-headed creatures or people, they are in some sort of tending to the gardens or mining and stuff like that. And I thought that was interesting. They're just they're not even hiding the fact that the Shi'ar are colonizers. They're just diving deep into that.
Kind of reminded me of High Evolutionary, story stuff, right? With the creatures and things.
There was a little bit of debate going on as to what race that was in particular. A few people were saying it was the Carbonites, which are Beta Ray Bill's race, but they tend to only be orange and don't have full horse features. There was another one, I want to say it was New Rockstars, who said the Chameleons, which I can't say I've read before, but the reference image looked a lot closer than Beta Ray Bill's grouping.
And my takeaway from this conversation, and I loved it, like how savage Lilandra was, because basically Xavier's talking about how he misses his X-Men, and he kind of asked Lilandra to go back to Earth with him. It was kind of like a little bit back and forth, and Lilandra's like, families are black holes.
Yeah,
she points at an actual black hole.
Yeah, and it's like you're gonna get sucked right back into that drama, especially with them X-Men, because those X-Men are nothing but drama.
I love that part of it too, because it wasn't just like, oh, all families are drama. Your family especially is drama.
I was waiting for Xavier to clap back and be like, well, isn't that the pot calling the kettle black there? How did we meet in the first place? It was your brother, right?
Yeah.
Well, this whole conversation kind of weirded me out a little bit, just because, like, I'm not used to seeing Professor Xavier flirt. He was very... Well, horny, flirtatious, sexually on the prowl. I'm just like, oh no, you're Professor X. Like, that was kind of like, I don't remember him doing that in the animated series. He wasn't getting up all over Myra, was he?
No, you only saw like young Xavier, but it was always like really, really quick. It was like flashbacks and like maybe quick moments, but you didn't ever listen to a full conversation of when he was flirting with somebody in the original. Also with Amelia, who was his nurse that then came to the Institute and stuff, and before she became an acolyte, all good stuff like that. He's really bad at relationships. I just want to point that out. Like, he's not Wolverine bad, but he's pretty bad at relationships.
Yeah, because he ended up having like a lab full of his exes work together, right?
In the Phalanx episode?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we saw the aftermath of his flirting. We never actually got to see it until now. I actually mentioned to JC last night as Scum and Villainy. I think part of it is we're seeing literal new angles of him. Because in the 92 series, we never saw like the head cocked to the side trying to like whisper into Lilandra's ear angle. We're like, ooh, I've never even seen that animation before.
So does Professor X have game?
I would say he does. If you are pulling a literal like head of an empire, you have to have game. Or she's just so emotionally broken that she doesn't know what game is. One of the two.
He can't seem to close. I think that's the one common thing. But they have this interesting conversation also about playing roles. And so what Lilandra said that, sorry, my cat Lucy is deciding to conquer this chair. Okay. Speaking of playing roles.
Please leave that in the edit, Rob.
Yep. I don't know where she's going because there's nothing over here to go to. Just a ghost probably. She's seeing somebody haunting me.
Lilandra does say, though, that maybe he should message them and make sure to invite them to the wedding. So I thought that was interesting because like she knows they bring the drama, but she's also like, you should still like let them be here for probably one of your biggest moments of your life,
I don't know if it's just me. I don't trust Lilandra anymore. This is very like, I don't know what the word is. It's borderline like abusive or gaslighty, because she's trying to control everything. But now like you have someone who is the product of generations of colonizing. It's like, yeah, bring your family here.
You know what? I feel as if there's an ulterior motive. She wants those mutants there because they're going to bring some good wedding gifts.
Oh, there you go.
There's definitely like some restaurant that she can't get food from deep out in the Shi'ar Empire on Chandalar. That she's like, yeah, we need some cheesesteaks from Philadelphia. You could bring those to the wedding.
And then they argue about if it's Pat's or Gino's.
Neither, it's Ralph's.
Oh, see, I was going to say Jim's. Everybody's got their favorite there. But yeah, so they go into talking about like these different roles they have to play. And Lilandra says that Professor Xavier plays the role of Peacemaker, and that she plays the role of Perfect. And then I know she's not contradicting herself, but to me kind of contradicts herself. She like whispers in Xavier's ear, like, don't ever pretend with me or something. I was like, wait, what?
Well, he was like, oh, I didn't realize me and my students have been playing make-believe this whole time.
Yeah. Which at the time sounded like, Chris, like what you were saying, like a kind of a flirty conversation. But we find out later this was like kind of a key concept that they introduced. So like, once again, great writing. Then we get the reveal that Xavier's only kind of healed in the sense that he didn't die, but his legs aren't technically healed. They're just an exoskeleton in the suit because he takes them off, which I feel like it was purposeful that happened during that conversation because they were talking about playing pretend.
Well, in him being in the armor, it's like they didn't want to show that to all of her subjects, that she's marrying somebody who would be considered like broken in the eyes of like a powerful empire,
Yeah. More gross from the Shi'ar.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I can't stop thinking about how much Lilandra is probably a bridezilla.
Could you imagine not just her being the bridezilla, but her sister as the maid of honor? Like that combination. It would be that needs to be like a parody comic for like Valentine's Day one year or something like that from Marvel. If anybody from Marvel is listening, I will write that for you. So
It should be the new What If episode.
oh, that'd be such a good what if.
Oh yeah, and they could argue about like the color scheme.
Yeah.
The Deathbird's like,
And Deathbird murders a bunch of people. Yeah.
there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
I already got the pacing. So
Then we finally, after all of this, catch up with Storm and Forge back at their cabin, and I guess
with a great transition though, because they're looking up and there's this weird dragonfly thing on fire in above the sky in space, above the sky in space. Yeah, that makes sense. And then it swaps over to that fucking owl still flying over the cabin.
Oh, that's right.
I fucking hate that owl too, man. I'm so glad we can cuss on this pod.
To be fair, I hate owls just in general, so that one made it even worse for me. So.
Oh my god, why do you hate owls?
I don't
in
trust
general?
anything that can make its head spin a 360. Like, that's literal demon shit.
And I guess that was another parallel, right? Is like owls haunting Storm, and there's like owl people haunting Xavier.
I mean, they are descendants of birds, so
Yeah, well, the old men in the council literally just look like owls.
Yeah.
Like even more than birds. And yeah, so I guess at the cabin, Storm is trapped in it, but it's not a hallucination necessarily. Like we were kind of suspecting last episode. Like it's not like a astral plane thing or
right.
whatever.
They're literally stuck in there. Yeah.
Yeah, and so Storm is tending to Forge. She's like temporarily like lifting her, vengeance of him lying to her or whatever. And then the adversary is like literally skulking in the corner, being the voice that's usually in my head. It's like, forget about him. He lied to you. And I was like, yeah, she's got a good point. That's why Storm's a better person than I am.
Oh my gosh, I hate to do this, but I have to go back to Lilandra because now it's in my head. So, if Lilandra and Professor Xavier got married and their species were, biologically compatible somehow,
Yep.
would they give birth to an egg?
I'm literally going to a safe search page. Just
You don't want to have a whole bunch of images on your computer of like alien egg species things coming out at you.
do Shi'ar reproduce with eggs?
Well,
Yeah, no, they do. They mentioned that.
Yeah, one of the counselors said, like, I knew you since you were a hatchling.
Yeah,
Right,
ever
but that could
since
just
she
be
hatched.
phrasing. I'm really hoping that's fucking phrasing. I know.
I feel like the Shi'ar are pretty literal.
The
single
Shi'ar
show.
conceive their offspring in eggs.
Great.
Yep. Thank you, Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so what is it going to be? A baby fetus thing or like an egg thing?
It would
Little
be,
both.
It would be a fetus thing inside the egg thing.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, thank God we don't
Okay.
have fan art.
Oh my lord.
Well, I
well,
think
don't, you just said it. You're somebody on whoever's listening right now that's an artist is going to make it.
I think you also just discovered, like, another class for your experience.
Oh
biology.
yeah.
X-Men bio.
Yeah. It's like,
Taught by Glob.
That was an interesting tangent, fellas. Let's get back to the timeline here. Where are we with
Yeah.
Storm again?
This show
good-
is just tangents. It's fine.
the good news, though, is we found our Instagram clip. So basically, the adversary is just like, he lied to you. You forget about him. And
And says, I can fix you.
yeah. And that's when, I mean, we already knew that the adversary is like not the good guy, but she, I guess, since it's Allison's
They?
voice.
It's
Yeah,
a demon. Demons can be
it's-
its. Yeah.
Yeah. Its voice, it's basically saying anything it needs to like coerce Storm into like self-loathing even more. Because
Yeah.
later on there's like contradictory stuff.
It very much has a Mephisto tone to it, and crystal clear, I am not saying this is Mephisto. This is not fucking WandaVision, where that's the theory every week. But the tone of trying to get Storm to agree very much felt like some of the better written Mephisto stories that I've read in the past.
And I mentioned this to JC last night. Like, we said that Lenore should win awards for the end of Remember It. Like, Allison should be at least up for something for this. She had a whole scene with herself, literally.
As Forge is just moaning in the corner and not providing any value. Yeah.
He's dying and everything. What
Yeah.
pain. But then the adversary takes Storm out on this, like, psychedelic journey, like, through, like, I don't know, hallucination desert, and then traps her in a coffin, which is horrifying, even if you're not claustrophobic. And we're reminded she is. Like a flying coffin at that?
Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
flying coffin, and then the adversary's face is like popping through the roof, which I'm not even going to ask the question of have you ever been in a coffin, because I'm hoping the answer is no. But like, there's no space in those things when they're closed to begin with. And this face is like, first it's a demon version of Storm, just like yelling at her, belittling her, like just everything. And then it starts transforming into all the other versions of the X-Men too.
It's terrifying. And I just cannot... when I'm watching that scene, I'm getting so many flashbacks to when Storm was trapped in the locker on Genosha from the original animated series, and remembering how terrified I was watching that as a kid and getting flashbacks to that in the present and just feeling Storm's claustrophobia in that moment. And the animation was so beautiful and breathtaking and horrific all at the same time.
Yeah, it was really, really good at like pulling anxiety out of the viewer, not just saying, oh, she's scared because of this. It was like, oh no, you actually like felt uncomfortable watching it for her.
I'm finally putting something together. I showed up to this filming with some YouTubers this morning. They're like, how you feeling? I was like, I have this really weird unexplained anxiety. I haven't thought about it, but now I'm putting it together.
Oh, it's X-Men 97. It's the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, well, I watched this episode 3 times within 24 hours. So
That's true.
Explain it.
I usually do midnight, Scum, and then watch before the recording today. But because of a few calls that I had this afternoon, I watched it again after getting back from Scum. So I literally was 3 times in 24 hours.
Oh my gosh. I'm like you guys. Like I wake up at the first thing I do is watch the episode. I can't do midnight, but I cannot turn on social media because everything is a spoiler. And then I'll do the Scum and Villainy thing. And like, you know, something else will happen. Like last week, we went to a house in Beverly Hills and just with the cast and some of the crew, I had a private screening of episode 5. And it was just like, I see these episodes so much. I feel like, you know, I don't know. I don't think I'm going to need to do a rewatch for a long time because it's ingrained in my memory now, except for the names of those damn characters in the beginning. The Imperial.
To be fair, I had to look up half of their names. So, yeah, but that is just, I love asking Rod if he recognizes any of the characters. That's my favorite.
The only time I've ever surprised JC is when I knew Tusk. But that was only because of action figures.
Yeah, of every obscure character that he could have known, he knew Tusk because it had a little guy that stood on Tusk's back. And I was like, okay. Back to the Adversary, though. I did love how it wasn't that Storm was scared of death. It was that Storm was scared of living.
Yeah.
And I haven't read the original LifeDeath. It's actually like pretty hard to find unless you're going to go onto like some illegal download site to snag it. But I don't know if that was Charlie who wrote that or if that was from the original series with the interactions that were there. But it was like, oh, that's a totally different way of looking at this character. It's like, now that you say it, I don't think Storm is scared of dying. It's like, oh, it's what do I have to go through as I'm living? That's the shit that's going to hit the hardest. So
yeah, and the Adversary, like that's why it said, so that's why you rush to play dead. And then Storm had a line that I think flew under the radar for most people, but I have to believe just knowing who, like, the people involved in writing this show were cognizant of what they were doing. The Storm kind of like said under her breath, like, I was so tired. And that's just something that happens like with a lot of marginalized groups, is that JC's heard me joke about this a lot, and it's only a half joke. AAPI excellence is great, but let's also like support AAPI mediocrity, because like being excellent all the time is fucking like exhausting. We have like several Hangover movies, but a bunch of white guys. But like, why does like the Asian superhero have to be like the best thing in the last century or whatever? Can we just make a bunch of shitty stuff too? So like, to Storm's point, she's like, I've had to be like the model mutant like ever since, you know, it was like gone public or whatever. And like, it's just tiring. Like, it's just, that was part of why she kind of like said to Jean, like, I kind of daydream about being normal sometimes, because they don't have to be like the example or like the defender of this title and stuff. And it's not to justify it, but it's just like that feeling, you know?
Yeah, I was actually chatting with a writer in LA yesterday. I don't want to say his name just in case he doesn't want this phrasing out there, but he was like, yeah, I'm just tired, man. And like, we kind of talked about it. He's a member of the LGBTQ community, and he's just like, the shit that's going on, it just starts to wear you down. It was a very heavy response for how are you doing to kind of scenario.
Like, I was just saying hi, man.
Yeah. And then Storm falls through the floor.
Yeah.
Through the ceiling.
Man, that was like Wile E. Coyote smacking against the rock, man. And there's a lot of those moments here where it's like more whimsical, even in serious moments.
Yeah.
And then we get this surprise that Forge knows Doctor Strange magic. Like,
Yeah, what was up with that? I just was like taken aback. I'm like, whoa, is that a Darkhold or Darkholm or oh my gosh, what's the name of that book?
Darkhold.
Darkhold. Is it a Darkhold?
So it's not a Darkhold. It is the imagery, though, absolutely felt similar to what we've seen in Doctor Strange and Kamar-Taj and everything like that. It wasn't New Rockstars. It was another one. I forgot the name. Screen begins with a C. It's not Screen Rant. I don't remember.
Junkies?
No, it's a Screen and then the letter C because their logo.
Oh, Crush.
Yes, they were the ones who pointed that out. Of magic in the MCU, at least, is pulling energy from other multiverses. So it would make sense that if this is technically within the Marvel multiverse, that magic would look similar cross universe. So the book with the insignia on it, that was Cheyenne Nation because of Forge's past or Forge's ancestry. So
Oh yeah, because that's his mother's book.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, Forge said that his mother practiced desert magic, which we're starting to get the idea here that ancient magic was just called by different names by different like groups of people and societies. And I like this line here. He said it sunk in despite his best efforts. So it kind of gives you this picture that Forge was always like the scientific, technical guy.
Right.
And even though he tried not to be, his mother's like kind of, for lack of better words, like superstitions kind of still imprinted on him. And it kind of brought me back to the whole point of like Shang-Chi in the movie, where he was like, I have to be the sum of both my parents. Like, there's not a choice. So like I have to like be that. And so this is what Forge is. And it's also kind of giving me some hope that we were joking before, like, is Forge's superpower is that he's just like really smart. So it's like more than that now. He might actually have like a mutant or like ancestral like tap into this ancient magic or something. I guess we'll see
Right.
what happens.
I forgot what story I've read, but it basically the paraphrase of it is magic is just science, just looked at from a different perspective. Like
Yeah, that
it's
was Thor, right?
Was it Thor? I can't remember candidly, but I know I've seen that at least in multiple spots in relation to comics. So, but yeah, he casts this spell. The Doctor Strange style lines are going across. You have the big circles around his hands, and then it sucks the adversary through this portal. And they get like the last like great jump scare out of it, where the adversary like reaches out one more time, almost gets Storm, and then gets sucked all the way back through. So
I loved how Forge banished the adversary specifically to the desert, but then here in about 10 minutes was surprised to see the adversary in the desert. You should have done like outer space or something, man.
or like the Sahara Desert, give it a little bit of distance.
Why not try for Antarctica or something? Freeze them. Freeze that adversary.
Yeah.
Right. Or send them to the Shi'ar. Send all the problematic birds together.
That's the clip right there.
Okay.
The problematic birds.
So Storm was like, surely this book of your mother's has something that can help you, because Forge has this like mystical poison bite, which earlier they had mentioned if it gets to his heart, like he's done. And so Forge is like, well, she did write about this magical cactus that has aloe that can, heal me. And Storm's like, tell me where and I'll go. And Forge says something kind of heartfelt. He was like, I might not make it that long, and if I don't want to be alone. Like, that shit is dark, man. Talk about the TV, like MA14. So he wants to go there. But he also did have a little bit of ulterior motive, which we'll get to
Right.
in a bit. And so she's like, well, let's pack up and go.
Do you notice what she called him? It wasn't just like, all right, let's go. It was, all right, then we ride together, my love. So that was her responding to what we saw in her previous episode, where he says he loves her and she slaps the shit out of him.
Yeah.
It's the same as love. It's just a different side.
But
I mean, again, new kinks are unlocked constantly during this show.
when she said that line, though, my romance novel heart was the soap opera drama of it. I just loved it.
Do you read romance novels?
I don't, but I used to be obsessed with soap operas. And X-Men, the animated series, was our children's soap opera. And then, when I grew up into high school age, it was Passions.
There have been a few conversations that have happened online where I've seen people who will go into these groups and they're like, why is there so much like talking and drama? Like, I just want to see the big robots fight the mutants. And it's like, one, if you go back to the original series, the fight scenes were like 30 seconds long and barely had any combat because of standards and practices at the time. And two, what do you think was happening for the rest of those episodes? Like, the whole series has been drama. That's what comic books were written, literally as drama for, like, usually at the original time, straight white kids. Like, that was the original scenario. So I don't know. Well, fucking wild.
Marvel is getting it right with their marketing, because they are playing on nostalgia a lot with these, toy commercials that look like they're coming out of the 90s. But my favorite was the soap opera one that just came out, where it looked like a trailer commercial.
It was like Days of Our Lives.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. Yeah. It was so cool. I'm just like, you guys get us. You know what's going on.
And I don't know when Days of Our Lives ended or if it's even still going on, but that was 100% meant to be for all of us who are like in our 30s into our 40s, where we were waiting for cartoons to come on, and like you're just like waiting for the last soap opera to end so you can watch your cartoons. No doubt.
Yeah. I asked about the romance novels because we've been trying to get my friend Shawnee on this show, and she has a romance novel podcast. And, we always try to connect something if it's like a not X-Men related podcast. In the original show, we were like, well, maybe we can find something. And then we were like, there are a surprising amount of episodes about secret babies and flings and relationships. So this is actually a really fitting, collaboration. But she ended up getting sick, so we haven't like rescheduled yet. But it's surprisingly easy to fit that concept into a lot of these episodes.
Oh yeah. And depending on the soap opera, all the resurrections, like that happens and shit all the time, right?
Always.
Yeah. So then we get back to the Shi'ar, and I never caught his name, but it was the older counselor. He was like a Lord Chancellor or something. Iraqi. Okay.
Yep.
And he actually, as much as I disagree with him on most stuff, he brings up a good point about the timing of everything. And Lalandra's like,
sorry, I got to rewind you real quick, Rod. Xavier gets introduced as Lalandra's royal consort. And then she gives the, like, I know you mentioned one line that was like low key. This was the low key line for me, where he was like, oh yeah, it's like I'm your pet or something. And then her response was, you can bark later. And I was like, oh, this is horny Xavier and horny Lalandra. Got it.
New kinks unlocked.
Yep.
It's like the more you know. Rainbow.
The more you know.
No, you're right. We learned so much about Xavier's sex life in this.
In one episode.
Right. He brings up a good point about timing, and then Deathbird marches in, speaking of timing, and it is presumably after conquering Rona and stuff, and it's like, look at this, and kind of says a bunch of stuff that is like really offensively coded.
I mean, literally, born on the wrong side of the stars. There is no doubt in my mind that is the wrong side of the tracks. Like, that is a 1-to-1 correlation between those phrases.
And she's like, Lalandra, you're really going to get with a peasant here?
And then Xavier said the phrase, like, all right, well, thanks for saying the quiet part out loud.
Wasn't that weird to hear from him?
It was, but I also could see this version of Xavier, like, he finally is getting a little bit of bite too. Like we've kind of talked about, Chris, I would love your perspective on it. It's not that he was like milquetoast, but he was very clearly like the good guy and wasn't like hitting some of those shades of gray like we see in the comics or other versions of Xavier. He was very like pure and didn't have a bite to what he was doing. But like, what's your experience with Xavier and like jumping into those shades of gray and such?
I mean, in the animated series, he just seemed like the white knight, the pure, archetype of a fatherly figure, a role model. And then it's when I started reading the comic books and really getting into the actual like issues. And you see a lot of this in the Krakoa era, where it's very evident in the Krakoa era that, there's a shadow side to Xavier. So I was a little bit taken aback when I first saw Xavier in this episode and his interactions and stuff, because I was so trying to connect it with the original animated series. But no, I think this is more true to the comics.
Agreed. Yeah. I did love her other line too. I feel like coming out of this episode, there are people who didn't know who Deathbird was, maybe aside from seeing the toy or seeing her in the video game, that are now like actually Deathbird fans, because she also throws in the line of like, oh yeah, this Terran from the Milky Way ghetto. And I was just like, holy shit.
And the memes started flying after that everywhere. Instantly.
Yeah. Like you were saying, you watch it literally first thing in the morning because you don't do midnight. I was seeing that screenshotted. It just didn't have the text on top of it. But on Twitter at 12:45 in the morning, people were literally dropping that in there. So
it's like a more elaborate way of saying, like, you know, that joke of like maybe we're the planet the aliens like lock their doors on when they fly by. And, you know, you make a good point about Xavier. We're seeing him different, but like, I mean, he's finally getting some of that good like egg making action. It just changed him as a man, right?
we always joke that we have to do one episode with the cameras on because of Rod saying stuff like this, because my reactions are just so pure at this point.
Well, also in 92, it was me like reaching, but 97 is doing everything that I once was reaching for. They're just like handing it to us and then extra.
Yep, they know what us fans want.
Right. So then
Egg making action.
Egg making action. To the hatchery.
Maybe we'll see you next episode.
Oh.
Deathbird challenges their marriage, or I guess engagement. I don't know what you call whatever this
engagement.
Yeah, with the Rite of Mdasha, which I made the comment last night to JC that this Rite of Mdasha seems too open-ended. That if it could be anything that the sister requests, or I'm guessing part of the royal family or something.
Yeah, it was to be a part of the royal family. And Xavier tries to like give the like smart ass reply. He's like, "Oh yeah, I read that book on my second day here." It's like, wait, so you've already been trying to marry her since your second day in the Shi'ar Empire? Got it. But it's supposed to be something that proves that you're loyal to the Empire. So I don't think it's fully open-ended. Like, I don't think she could be like, we're going to do like a road race and you have to run faster than me. That I don't think it could apply to.
Yeah, it's just there was no like council about it. Like there, you know, like nobody had to like weigh in, but it seemed like everyone else agreed anyway. But yeah, so she says like, and my challenge is that you have to erase all your memories of Earth, your X-Men, you know, and then Lilandra's like, well, you know, he's like one of the best like telepaths in the galaxy or whatever, so that's not going to be easy. And then Deathbird's like, you didn't let me finish. You have to do it. And it's like, oh god, okay, it's family, man.
I really want to write this what if episode now.
There you go. Look at the bachelorette party.
Oh god, I just go into like some fuckboy planet and stuff. Yeah. Disney will never accept this pitch, but God, I want it to happen. Thank you for the inspiration, Chris.
Well, you know, if there was other challenges besides this pretty much metaphorical death, because, you know, if he loses his memories, he loses himself, you know?
Right,
that's like
loses his whole personality of what brought him.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's pretty much like a death, and that would prove his loyalty to just being Shi'ar. But what other evil thing would she do to do this challenge, do you think?
I think a road race.
Oh, yeah, it's a road race on Rainbow Road for Mario Kart.
She would just be that much of a bitch of like, you have to run faster than me, which we've also already seen. She's an amazing athlete, like how fast she's moving and zipping around. But she would be like, and you can't use your suit. Like, she would actually pull that shit. I guarantee it. Like, the most petty sister shit possible.
If this were a simpler show, I think that they would have done like her saying he had to kill one of his X-Men or something. That would have been the proof. But this is kind of, like you said, essentially that, but with himself. It's basically like cosmic severance, right? Like you just become a completely different person. But then it like segues over to like the horniest statue I think we've seen in X-Men so far. It's the two gods of the Shi'ar that have united.
Shara and Kithris.
Yeah, and yep. Xavier is like contemplating, or we're going to say he's contemplating. We established he's horny, so he's in front of this statue. And then Gladiator joins him and explains the art of the statue. And there's like, Xavier points out this like contradiction of like, I thought the Shi'ar didn't believe in art. He's like, yeah, but sometimes it's symbolic. He's like, yes, like art.
Like art is.
I think he references like Rudyard Kipling in the conversation.
Which I did a little bit of digging on that one because the perspective was essentially Gladiator saying how colonizing is just a part of what they do and it brings people together all as one. And Kipling like is most well known for The Jungle Book. That was Kipling's major thing. But also wrote, it was called A White Man's Burden. And what that was about, the British and Imperials needing to be the ones who had the responsibility to colonize the world. And that's why Xavier actually isn't saying that Kipling is like brilliant or a genius or anything like that, because he was falling into those colonizing traps too.
And then in summary, my takeaway from this like conversation was Xavier doesn't want to break up with Magneto. And like in my head, I don't know if you've heard the memes with the audio of like do and my friend Steve. Like it just felt like this whole thing's about marrying Lilandra, but he's like, but Magneto.
Yeah. There is a lot of subtext in the writing of X-Men 97 that, so it would go over some people's heads. Like in episode 5, Rogue is telling the story of how she lost her virginity, but they don't exactly come out and say that in those words. There's a lot of subtext there. And, with this line, pay attention to this Magneto line, because, throughout the season, I have a strong feeling there's going to be a lot of bisexual subtext with these characters.
Yeah, just the phrasing of it too. It was like, I wish to remember him.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is something that you have feelings as you're saying it. I'm not necessarily saying it's romantic feelings or anything like that, but it is also like there is a love that is there that isn't just like, oh yeah, this is my good friend. I don't want to forget about him. I wish to remember him versus I don't want to forget about him are different things.
Yeah.
And also choosing that as opposed to what we normally hear about X-Men. Like, he didn't, like we hear about him not wanting to forget the X-Men. That makes sense because he raised these kids. But yeah, this man that, at the very least, trauma bonded over, right? Like, they were together. But yeah, it was an interesting moment.
So Lilandra arrives at the tail end of this conversation and is like, even acknowledging that Deathbird is going too far with the ask, and she also gives the argument of why he should do it. Why not start anew? Everything you did on Earth, they didn't care, and they literally tried to kill you. And Deathbird wants Lilandra to forfeit her throne. So Xavier's like, yeah, you saved my life, you gave me a new home, you've shown me devotion beyond compare, and now it's time for me to give that back to you. So we're led to believe that he's down at this point. So
yeah, it's kind of like when a couple gets married and one of them has to work so the other can go to school or something. I've heard stories about that with some of my friends and stuff, but it's still, to me, this is just personally, Lilandra's leaning more towards that you're asking more than you gave or whatever, but that's just my opinion. Then we get back to the desert. Forge and Storm are riding a horse and
to Snow Snake Tower, which does not exist. I actually looked that one up.
Yeah, and Forge is trying his best to hang on for dear life, literally. I love this conversation where Storm was apologizing for bringing the Adversary into the scenario, and then Forge is like, well, a big evil owl that feeds off of anger and self-loathing, call me chum in the water. And then Storm was like, then we'll be chum in the water together.
So there was one interesting part about that differed from the original comic, where there was something that Forge did that originally summoned the Adversary in the comic. And I don't know if they were just kind of playing coy with that, or it was the Adversary was just attracted to their misery. I was genuinely curious if that was intentional or if it was just we're going to leave it ambiguous.
I kind of interpreted it as in general, or at least what we're led to believe right now, as that the Adversary was attracted to Forge's loathing about creating the technology, right?
Right.
For the inhibiting powers and stuff. But yeah, then they go into this cave that has a whole lot of history that I feel either was just someone really Charlie really interested in history, or it will come back a little bit later because it seems like real world history about the different wars and stuff, and people, the military or the soldiers storing weapons and stuff there.
Well, I got the vibe it was because of this being the dual scenario story that has so much to do with colonizing and such. Mm-hmm. It was helping mirror the two. Oh yeah, the two conversations.
Yeah, because Storm said these soldiers wiped out your people, and I don't know. There was a lot to unpack there. But then they get into the cave, and
the part of it that I thought was really interesting was Forge saying we thought they were here to help, so why wouldn't we let them build this base? And then they go into the Little White Lie, which is much deeper conversation. The White Lie is that could be its own podcast by itself, because it was, if you acclimate to our society, you'll be safe. And we're seeing that with all these other societies that the Shi'ar are taking over. And then literally, like I said, the people who have the horse-like resemblance are miners and gardeners for this more royal cast of people. So
yeah, and
but before he could finish that, he almost passes out, and yeah.
Yeah, and then Storm's like, okay, now show me where the cactus is. And Forge is like, okay, so might have buried the lead here. One of the reasons I wanted to come with you is I know you're claustrophobic, so I have a surprise for you. And he shines a flashlight down the narrowest. I wouldn't be comfortable going down that tunnel. Like, because I've heard those stories of, like, spelunkers getting stuck because they get way too confident,
Yeah.
you know, going through tight spaces. And
Yeah,
he's like,
it's the nightmare of the movie Descent. Like, I'm actually less scared of the monsters in Descent than just the images of crawling through rocks in Descent.
yeah, it was so tight that she ended up having to put the flashlight in her mouth.
Yeah.
Right? Like
I get scared at National Geographic, you guys, when they go explore the pyramids and they have to dig, you know, the holes to climb through. I can't. This whole scene was a nightmare for me.
That's real shit too. Like, I'm actually more okay with the Descent because that's not a real cave that somebody is in. A pyramid in National Geographic, no, hard pass.
and they do this dramatic zoom into Storm's eyes, which we've never seen wider.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've seen wide-eyed Storm in shock and awe before, but this was like, all right, well, you need to, obviously you're going to have to face your fears with a villain called the Adversary, so we're just going to go all the way with this. And they leave us on that mini cliffhanger when they cut back to the Shi'ar Council.
And how dare they do that?
Right.
You know?
So there's going to be a supercut of just all the life-death storyline in one thing whenever this comes out.
Rod will do the supercut. He'll upload it to our channel, and we'll get our first strike from Disney. It'll be perfect.
Yay, attention from Disney. Actually, they have helped us out. They introduced us to, like, Isaac and stuff.
Yeah.
So we love you. So, yeah, they're at the... This is the energy I got from it. It was supposed to be, like, ceremonial, but it looked like the beheadings, you know?
Oh,
that
yeah.
would happen. Because...
It was closer to an execution than a ceremony. Yeah.
Because Xavier was on his knees. Lilandra's behind him, like, ready to go. She has no, you know, like, reluctance for this. And the Chancellor is going through all the stuff that Xavier's denouncing. And he's like, life on Earth. And for the most part, Xavier's, like, not really resisting too much. But then he gets, like, the X-Men. And he just goes silent. And then the way they animated Lilandra is just kind of like, you could feel her, like, resentment through her temples. Was it Deathbird that ended up calling it out? It was like, it's like, see, he resists.
Deathbird arrives, comes from off camera with her own set of guards. Like, I love... I think we pointed this out in Beyond Good and Evil originally, that Deathbird has her own set of guards that are in her color scheme.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's why she would be arguing. That's her groomsmen, right? For this wedding scene that we're talking about. Like, she'd be arguing for the different color schemes. She's like, well, you can't have your bridesmaids be in silver because I need to have my groomsmen in fuchsia or whatever.
Yeah, fuchsia and pink.
Yeah. And then this is like one of the coolest action sequences, right?
The fight starts. Basically, Deathbird says, you know, you're just as insane as our brother was. I can't let you intermix our species with his freak fluids.
Oh, yeah.
It was such a burn. I was just like, ooh,
yeah,
gosh, nasty, vile.
And then one of the Chancellor people that's watching from above is also like, he's not even a pure Terran. And it's like, geez, like, ugh.
They're laying it on
a lower
thick.
caste, right?
Yeah, a lower caste because he's a mutant. And I was like, okay, got it. I don't like the Shi'ar. I was already not super keen on the Shi'ar, but I really don't like the Shi'ar.
Yeah, I like that came from an owl man, like, of all people. Like,
that was an owl woman. Lilandra does tell Gladiator to arrest all of them. Deathbird attacks, and then to your point about this has become anime with the fight scenes to some extent, Rod, where Deathbird rushes in, tries to swipe at Lilandra. Gladiator, like, steps in front of it and then just shoulder checks her, like, right into a pillar.
everyone cheered.
It was great.
Oh, yeah.
It was great.
It was huge. I turned to David, who voices a character. I was like, how does it feel to be the fan favorite of this episode right now? You're such a badass, dude.
Real quick pause. Chris, got to ask you this because you are such a comic person. Gladiator versus Superman, how does that play out?
Oh my gosh, it's a Gladiator because he's going to figure out the kryptonite, you know?
You're the first person who has said that.
Really? Nobody else thought of kryptonite?
Dude, I am the instant KO. He's ripped in half. If you get Superman unleashed, Gladiator's gone.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, if Gladiator does not have kryptonite on hand.
Okay. If it's a random battle that they don't know they're going to fight each other, let's put it in that scenario. Then,
well, yeah. I want Gladiator to have the red kryptonite, actually, because that's like on Smallville, they get all like saucy and seductive and all that stuff and, you know, sassy. Yeah.
See, I've I've never actually watched Smallville, shockingly. I know, I'm awful.
It's okay. I forgive you. At the time of this recording, it's actually Superman's birthday. Side fact.
Nice.
It premiered on this day in 9.
That is shocking that my feed did not give that to me today. I must have such a Marvel heavy feed between X-Men and Hawkeye that I just don't get any DC news.
Me either. No, it's for real. It's all Marvel. I mean, like, all of a sudden, everything is Marvel for me. Even Coca-Cola right now.
They don't have a Hawkeye can, and I'm pissed at them for that. It's a personal insult to me.
Yeah, so I saw, I don't even watch Invincible, but I play Mortal Kombat, and I saw, like, they animated Gladiator a lot like Omni-Man, the way, like, fast moves between everything.
Yeah.
And, like, now I'm just convinced that, like, there doesn't even need to be an Imperial Guard, just Gladiator.
I think it's just out of pure quantity that he can't do everything at once, is literally what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Because Gladiator is always the leader of the Imperial Guard, and even at one time in the comics, I believe when there was not an emperor for the Shi'ar, he stepped in as like the temporary one as they were figuring that stuff out. So
Yeah. And then this like huge fight sequence is like a vortex of the family infighting with each other. And this is when I made the comment last night, is like, at what point does the entire Shi'ar like look down on this family? It's like, maybe this family isn't fit to lead our people.
Right. And that's where all those chancellors are kind of like looking down from above, like, maybe we should get out of here. This isn't going too well.
I have a what if episode that I just wrote in my head. Okay, so picture it. Lilandra actually wipes his brain, and he forgets the X-Men, he forgets his beloved Magneto, and he forgets his morality and all of the things that led him to be the person that he is. So he is going to become way more Shi'ar, and Deathbird is going to be like, Professor Xavier is not that bad now that he's a badass, you know, without all those Terran memories.
He starts thinking that Lilandra is the boring one now, and he falls in love with Deathbird.
Yes, and they have hatchlings. They hatch away.
But they're really, really angry hatchlings.
Telepathic hatchlings.
And they'd have pink eggs.
Yes.
I just made that up, but
Yep, that's how biology works. That is Shi'ar biology.
On the next episode of What If?
Perfectly, that transitions to him bringing everybody into a classroom to teach them about the birds and the Shi'ar.
yeah, there you go. Birds of the Shi'ar. See, you're making puns now.
I hate it. I hate myself for it.
And this was the cheer for Xavier moment last night as Coming Villain.
Yeah.
Because he was like, oh, I forgot I can do that. That's literally what he says. He's like, I forgot my greatest power. Like, maybe you weren't completely healed yet. Because this whole time you didn't think about, because he's like, oh, I don't know how to talk to these people. It's like, you can infiltrate their minds. Okay. So yeah, he pulls everybody into the classroom, and then this, if it was already kind of anime coded, it went full anime at this point on, because it was like whimsical. Like, he was not juggling, but like kind of throwing an apple up in the air and stuff. And he's like, all right, class, back at the cave, Storm is, like we mentioned before, the flashlight, I almost said lighter, the flashlight in her mouth, crawling through, and she does find the cactus. It kind of looks like the herb from Wakanda, right? Because it's glowing. Not the same color or anything, but it's a glowing plant, I guess is my point. And I don't know if like that starts to have significance in the Marvel universe when we have like mystical glowing plants, like they come from similar things, whatever. So she finds it. She gets so close, and then we see the eyes in the shadow and the voice
As she drops her flashlight too.
Yeah, that's right. Into the vortex that she could have fallen into. Storm is surprised, like, how did the bird that Forge banished to the desert end up in the desert? And they have this whole conversation, but this is going to be this part that I rewatch maybe every day of my life from this point on. The Adversary contradicts itself, like before, saying like, you can just go live a quiet life and not have powers and not have problems, you know?
Yeah,
like,
you didn't have to take the high road. You could have let him die.
and he's like, you had to be the bigger woman, and then does like the creepy like yummy yummy, you know, like, yes, that self-loathing,
and then it does the owl head turn, which is why I hate owls. So yeah, just totally like makes my skin crawl.
and the adversary calls it, like, you know, wake up from your, you can live your daydream. That's what it was. And then that's when that's the thing that's like snaps Storm kind of out of it. The screen goes black and Storm says, it's not a daydream. And I was just telling my brother, I love this line. Storm's like, you all are echoes of me, so let them thunder, for I am lightning. I'm like, fuck yeah.
Yes.
Tear up thinking about that line, as corny as it is, but it's so on point. It's just kind of reminiscent of Carol Danvers in the Captain Marvel movie. She's like, I've been living with my hands tied behind my back.
Mm-hmm.
And so Storm kind of gives this implication that maybe Forge's device in the previous Life Death episode worked on the physical level, but Storm's emotional state was still holding that part of her back.
Right.
So she's like, it wasn't just the executioner's gun. It wasn't just the inhibitor radiation or whatever. It's like, it was me because I believed the lie. And there's the reference back to the little white lie. And so then the screen comes back from black and she's starting to push the rocks away. And I don't even know how to describe the sequence. The electricity starts building up. They cut the outside. You see like a literal storm brewing in the desert and stuff. And
you see it. Then, you even see it from space.
I love. Yeah, they showed like the satellite. That had to be the size of a continent, right? The way they.
I interpreted like the equivalent of a full-fledged hurricane. Like it was that big. Yeah.
Yeah. And then she emerges from whatever, like a hole in the ozone.
The feathers of the adversary are like floating around her at the time
right.
too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because I forgot to mention. Yeah, when she emerged from the rocks, there was all the electricity and stuff. Where I'm lightning and then lightning everywhere. I knew what was coming because I had posted on my stories. I think we posted to the Cyclops was waiting for me stories too. Of like there was like a teaser trailer a few episodes ago that showed like Goddess Storm, and I was like, wait, is that going to be a flashback? And when she emerged from that, I was like, oh, this is happening. And like when I watched it at 12:01 here, I was like, my neighbors were probably like, what's going on with this guy?
They got your neighbor's deaf.
Yeah, no, that's my landlord. So
the landlord.
my neighbor's a musician, so he's used to hearing drums at 7 a.m. But he's like, why is he screaming for some woman coming out of a tornado? So it empowers her, gives her powers back, gives her new outfit. The headdress starts like forming on her hair, and apparently also gives her hair extensions, which is awesome. She strikes a pose,
Yes,
in the sky. Then she does like what was the movie, like Spirit, the one about the horse, the animated show. She starts like flying through the desert, like she has her wings back. It's like a really cool moment because it kind of calls back to when she imagined flying while riding on horseback, and now she's next to the horses that are somehow not spooked to a flying person.
I just love they've taken the character in an opposite approach when it came to the outfit, because Storm's original outfit is the one that we see her transform into here, which that debuted in Giant Size X-Men #1 in 1975. And then she didn't go to the white outfit until the 90s when she became one of the leaders of the team.
And I just have to say, oh my gosh, like I always wanted Storm to have that instant costume change transformation electricity thing happen again. And it only happened once, to my recollection, in the animated series in Night of the Sentinels, the premiere episode, where she was in her mall outfit and then she used her electricity to transform her outfit to the white outfit. I was like, yes, I want more of this Sailor Moon awesomeness. And it never happened again until now. And my dreams, they came true. We get to see it again.
And I think it may just be that scenario where, because they use it so sparingly, it felt so much more special too. I have no idea how the power works that it does it, and I will never question it because it made us all so happy.
Yeah. Well, my theory is that there's electrons that I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but it's comics.
I think it ties back to, in this show at least, they're going to make some allusion to her being tied to old magic as well. Or the science that's unexplained or whatever.
I mean, she was literally called the Weather Witch and stuff in her tribe and stuff. So who knows? And
in the comics, she went to limbo, and an alternate version of her lived in limbo for many years, and she became an older woman. And through those years, she learned witchcraft and was a practicing witch. So I think there is witch within her.
The witch is back, man. So that's another thing I mentioned earlier was this whole sequence. We now know that Storm has a specific score because this happened when she gave him the forecast in the debut episode. It's the same piano music. So once again, shout out to the Newton Brothers. They really nailed it with this one. To me, it almost rivals the Wonder Woman theme in the DC movies. It's so iconic and it makes you feel something.
It's the only thing I like from the DC movies.
Same.
Yeah. Shout out to Tina Gal for playing that iconic electric cello line, and also the guy that wrote it. Yeah. But my notes here for this whole section was just in all caps, like Rod just screams for 10 straight minutes. Both in my house, both at Scum and Villainy, like whatever.
So when you're done screaming, you realize they're back at Forge's cabin. She's made this like weird, gross green goo that she's putting on, and they're kind of talking about like, oh, we should go on a vacation and like go to a tropical island. And I'm like, oh no, tropical islands are not good for your people right now.
Yeah. I also loved, I think I mentioned this to you last night, that Forge is like, I appreciate the help, but did we have to trek all the way back to the cabin for you to put this cactus on me? This was time sensitive to begin with. So they're just thinking about, basically going on a honeymoon. They're skipping the wedding. They already done did that. Well, for all we know, they done did that. We don't know. Or maybe in the biblical sense they did. Who knows?
In the comic, they definitely went for the biblical sense.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Are you two into them as a couple? Do you ship them like long term?
In this reality, I do. The favorite relationship I have, though, is still the One Man Worth episodes and having Storm and Logan as a couple, but it only works in that reality for me.
What did I text you during the first LifeDeath? Was like, are we going to call them Form or like Stores or something?
Storage.
Storage.
So you send me certain stuff that I ignore. That's one of them. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm here for it, especially because the way they depicted Forge here, and they weren't shy about showing that Forge is very aware that he's an attractive man. He's got the booty shorts on and he's posing and everything. But yeah, they basically want to go on a honeymoon, and especially in this show, we know that and whenever someone has good ideas or good news, that we're literal seconds away from tragedy.
So you see in the bedroom that there's a TV there, and then he picks up the remote, and I was having my yelling moment because I predicted this was the way the full episode was going to end, was that Storm was going to get her power back, and then they were going to turn on TV and see the Genosian aftermath, and I was like, fuck, they did. I mean, it was absolutely the right call, but fuck, they did it to us, Yeah.
I think the only surprise was they didn't specifically show Storm Gambit or reveal that it was Gambit.
I don't think there's a camera that was getting that close to the island, to be honest.
Well, no, this show has like weird physics. Like when they were showing the news footage from, was it last episode or a couple episodes back? They were getting angles that like a news crew couldn't get.
Oh yeah, the random B-roll of like the X-Men in their kitchen and stuff. Yeah.
It made sense because the impression I got was Storm saw it and she's like, oh, all my friends are dead.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, just my people are dying.
Yeah.
So, but I did think it was interesting that they mention Trish Tilby is the news reporter again on it. They mentioned that the mutants who left their countries to go to Genosha were not being allowed back into their own countries if they were survivors. And then they mentioned it was possibly the opening salvo of the Evolutionary War. And I thought that was a weird choice because the Evolutionary War actually was a thing in the comics in the 80s. And it had all to do with the High Evolutionary. I thought that was an interesting choice because I don't think they're going to go to the High Evolutionary in this one. I think it's the Evolutionary War in the same way that Age of Ultron was not actually Age of Ultron. I think that was just like a Marvel name Easter egg kind of scenario.
Interesting. Do any of you play Marvel Snap?
I do daily.
Oh my gosh, I really like the High Evolutionary card because he gets to like upgrade all the cards and give them powers, the ones that don't have powers, and I really like playing that deck. That's all I wanted to say. Segue tangent.
It's a great deck. It sucks if you're playing against that deck. Yeah.
Although, seeing how this show is gone, they could surprise us, but also cover the entire thing in a single episode. So who knows? Yeah. So that closes the chapter on Storm and Forge. As far as Storm getting her powers back, very satisfying, at least for me. Super huge Storm fan because, like you mentioned, that was her first or one of her first outfits. So, to me at least, that was a surprise. Was we didn't think it was going to go back to that, or in this show, it's not going back. So this is like her highest evolution or whatever. So super excited, and like I love that we can just trust the show because even though I mentioned this in previous episodes of the podcast, I'm not as ever concerned about Storm's like appearance as more of her characterization. Like I'll take my least visual representation of Storm over like any Halle Berry characterization of Storm. So the Mohawk wasn't my favorite, but I wasn't offended by it or anything. But I am so stoked that this is the Storm we're landing on, at least for a while, because this was always my favorite from the arcade games and everything. I posted a picture back at LA Comic Con when the one thing I bought was the Storm patch, and it was that one. And I reposted yesterday. I was like, she's back. So then we go back to the astral plane classroom with Xavier and the Shi'ar students, and the gladiator asks a question. I can't remember what it was, but Xavier is like, I'll answer your question, but also please raise your hand from now on. Like he's just treating them like literal children.
Yeah, it literally is like, yeah, if you don't raise your hand, that's going to be a demerit.
Yeah. And then Deathbird interrupts and he's like, oh, demerits. And she won't shut up, and she's actually kind of animated like really quickly like an anime. And then Xavier like manifests like an apple in her mouth, and her eyes get real big.
Well, hers was great too, because it was like, what is power built upon? And she's like, on the skulls of our enemies. Like, just so fucking dramatic.
And basically, this is such, for it being so goofy, and as much as like I would have, I agree with you, Chris, I would have loved to see way more Storm and Forge. It was kind of worth it for this like lesson from Xavier. He basically breaks down like colonialism and like imperialism for the Shi'ar.
And there was the great comparison that happened where, they start using this chalkboard for the metaphor. And it's like, well, there are these fledgling societies, but you cut them off at their knees. When we neglected to mention it, when that fight broke out, she literally whacked the legs off of the exoskeleton on Xavier to knock him down.
Oh, I didn't put that together. To extend from that, like, he says straight up, the Shi'ar is a snake oil racket. One of I think the Chancellor says like, well, Earthlings do the same thing.
That might makes right.
And so Xavier says, oh, the rhyme that sells the lie, that we must pillage worth from one another, that for me to be more, you must be less. I was like, man, like, this is like stuff that I've been trying to put words to for years.
Right.
And then this animated show, like, just did it. And he's like, your existence against mine. Why? Says who? And then Lilandra. Now this is where I started like believing in Lilandra again. She's like we made the rules by playing make believe. It's like, yes, everything is made up. All this hierarchy stuff.
And then
all made up.
The Chancellor gives the response of like, well, getting away from that will confuse people, and that is totally that like imperialist mentality of, oh, we're not enslaving people, we're giving them a better world because they're savages. Like that's essentially what he's saying in that moment.
Yeah. And Xavier says, I'm not gonna try to sugarcoat it. Coexistence is messy, but he makes a good point. It's like the universe is very old and we're very young, so we have a lot to figure out. And I like to think, once again, knowing not me knowing, the writer personally, just knowing of the writer and writers of the show like in general, that this was not just to the Shi'ar, but like kind of to part of the audience. Most of the people who already think the way they do won't change their mind, but hopefully there's like one or two friends that are in the room who are like, that's a bunch of bullshit. Wait, we do that. Yep. So if it only reaches like one friend out of every like problematic friend group, it's worth it, because like you parallel something that they think is cool, right? Or all of us think are cool, to like drive the lesson home. But it's such a well written and spoken, very couple minutes.
Yeah.
To describe everything.
Yeah.
And then I was actually excited to hear more from Xavier, but then the globe, not the world, but the globe on his desk starts spinning uncontrollably, and then everything just goes haywire from here. He looks up, and not only are there way more desks than there were before, they're all full of skeletons. I'm assuming that's supposed to represent everyone in Genosha, not just the X-Men.
Yeah.
And then he looks up, and there's Gambit like rising out of the ground, like this towering over him, and he can sense something's already wrong, but then like in a flash, like Gambit turns into a skeleton, and it's like he didn't even need to be told. He knew everything that happened, like in detail. I'm not exactly sure what's going on in that. I'm assuming that there's some implication of that's not just him sensing stuff, right?
Well, they're connected through the astral plane, and in the spiritual context, everything is one in the universe. And when you're on the astral plane, he's actually connecting to probably Gambit's spirit, which was translating, the death. In my perception, I think it was actually Gambit coming to him and telling him this story of what happened with this imagery. And I could be wrong, but that's just how I saw it.
I think that's a great interpretation. I kind of read it very similar to like Star Wars. Like, this is, like, to your point, the Force and the astral plane are similar from like a perspective. So it was, all those deaths are because all these mutant souls were leaving their bodies at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's kind of tragically beautiful. I never thought about it that way. I was actually kind of wondering, and maybe this either substantiates or mutes the idea has, like, do you think that there was a purpose in not showing Magneto in that? Like, was a hint that he's still alive?
That's what my interpretation is I don't think Magneto's dead.
Me either.
I think it was a
ruse.
I think It was a little bit of a curveball to not put him into the opening credit because you were purposely removing Gambit, but I do not think he's dead.
Yeah, they don't have to be dead to be removed, right? Storm was gone ever since episode 2 or after episode 2.
Right, but your vibe after seeing Remember It is like, oh, are they going to put him in the opening credits because we saw them die and then you remove him? It kind of like brings your defenses down on it.
Yeah, totally.
My theory about this is that if you don't see a dead body in the comic book world, they're not dead.
Yeah, and even if you do, they still might not.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of eggs, the Krakoan era, they hatch out of eggs and get rebirth. So who knows? Maybe
they hatch out of the originally gold balls that they rename as egg. I love that there have been 2 references to that character in the series so far.
So that's probably coming back too, then, right?
I mean, who knows at this point? Like,
right.
I mean, we don't even have Hope Summers. How do we have the resurrection protocols without Hope? Another fucking Summers.
Yeah. And then Xavier, for lack of better words, wakes up from the lesson, but he falls over and
he gets blasted in the vision, and like literally that same green blast that was killing all the mutants, like it removes the skin from his face. So yeah.
I mentioned this to JC last night. It's like, wouldn't it be great but terrible if Xavier just died at that point? Because they kind of animated him at the beginning like that. He just fell over kind of limp. Like, after all of that, now he's actually gone. But no, he's still talking, and he basically tells Alondra, like, I got to go back right now. And she's like, but we're this close to convincing the council. And he's like, I don't care.
None of it matters.
Yeah. And she was like, but, like, what about, like, us? And he's like, I don't care anymore. If that breaks up our intergalactic love affair, then so be it. And she's like, well, okay.
Star-crossed love affair, because they were particularly quoting Shakespeare in that.
That's right. Yeah, star-crossed love affair. So be it. And we didn't see Lilandra's reaction, but I think we could imagine what it was because it cut to black.
Yeah.
Oh, she's pissed.
And then
she is so Bridezilla pissed.
Yeah. I mean, this is literally like being left at the altar.
Yeah. She's like, what? I gave you false pretenses and made you fake everything for my nation, for colonialism, and this is the things I get. And then when it comes back from black, we had like the animated equivalent of like the after credits. We see Boulevard Trask running away. This is an ongoing joke, but I'm kind of serious about this. That he gave someone his DNA to access Master Mold, and like, Chris, I don't know, like, it's not a hair sample, right?
Oh my.
God damn it. It's a blood sample, Rod.
Okay. In this case, it might be blood. We were saying in the original 92 series when Sinister was like, Scott Summers, I'm going to have your DNA. Yeah. And he has like this tube thing. He's like, that's that, right?
Nope,
and then Wolverine comes in. He's like, smells like DNA. We're like, what would smell like DNA?
Oh,
stop it!
Oh my gosh, I'm starting to having flashbacks to this now. It was DNA the whole time.
But as he's running by, Trask is like, oh yeah, just kill me for what happened in Genosha. I thought that was a really weird line because he's running from Sinister. Yeah. So is he saying like he didn't know this was going to happen, so he's just expecting revenge on it kind of scenario? Because I think he would consider Sinister aligned with the mutants more than against the mutants.
Yeah, I don't know much more about Sinister outside the show, but even I know that like this isn't Sinister's MO to like wipe out mutants. If anything, he'd want to like put them in something to collect stuff, right?
Yeah. Sinister is scary as hell, and in this scene I would be terrified and running away in horror, just like Trask is.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is this Sinister in 92 into 97 is the scary Sinister. He doesn't get into like the weird, pompous, theatrical Sinister. Like, he's a little bit of a theater kid, but he's also like genuinely terrifying.
Yeah, I love new Sinister in comic books, though. Animated series terrified the hell out of me with those teeth and everything.
It just feels like a different Sinister.
It is.
Both versions are great, but it's a different Sinister.
Yeah, exactly. But I prefer the one that loves a luxurious cape.
Yes. Yeah. The one who actually looks forward to the Hellfire Gala even when he's not killing the rest of the mutants. Yes.
Mm-hmm. I kind of took this as, because he says that was just a prologue, right? So I kind of took this as like, oh, we're going to get a Voltron of villains, right? It's not just him.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's lots of conversation that are alluding to Sinister is just the pawn in this, and this is Apocalypse. I don't know if I necessarily agree. I see the hints at the beginning of the episode and everything like that, but like this also doesn't feel like something Apocalypse would do to me either.
Yeah. Or what's the then? Now this is a new character to me, but the Cassandra Nova theory and stuff.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I because in the comics, Cassandra gets Trask's, I want to say it's cousin or nephew or something like that. That's how she gets the DNA to activate the Wild Sentinel.
Mm-hmm.
Does she get the DNA?
She got a blood sample. Yeah, I mean, it's so hard. Like I've been saying, Rod was the first person to ever mention to me the theory that Ms. Marvel was a mutant. And I was like, no, how could that be? And then he was spot the fuck on. And I'm just like, I can't question it. I can't, because I'm so biased from the books that when Rod asks a pure question, he might just be right because he hasn't, he doesn't have 40 years of baggage like I do on these damn characters. So.
Yeah, my ignorance is clairvoyant.
Yeah.
Like, and so far my things, they're not even calls. They were just questions I asked for this specific run of the 97 series. Was like, oh, that lady in DC, she's Mystique, right? Or Cooper's Mystique, right? And also everyone's gonna die, right? And then, well, the Mystique thing hasn't happened, but everybody did die.
Everybody did die. Yeah. So that's the episode. The only other notes that I have that we didn't cover yet was just in the crowd shots of the Shi'ar throne room, there is an alien there who looks like a Dabari from the comics. That is actually the race that was in X-Men Dark Phoenix, which we've all hopefully wiped from our memories at this point. But that was the only other thing from all the research and Easter eggs and notes.
Wait, was that the alien that had like the 6 eyes?
It was the one that looked like it was like green and it had like gills on it, and it was almost like the celery top hair.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'll throw a picture on the Instagram when this goes live so people can see it. But yeah, I was actually like looking through all the Shi'ar and stuff like that, and I was actually shocked there were not more of like cameos and stuff like that, because we just kind of got spoiled in X-Men the animated series because Larry Houston was so good about dropping in like people in backgrounds and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
Well, speaking of that one alien lady with the 6 eyes, I saw a meme that I can't unsee where they put pictures side by side of Lois Griffin from the Family Guy, the guy who plays the cop, the neighbor in Family Guy. Yeah, Joe. And Spiral. And you mash those 3 characters up, and that's that one lady alien with the 6 eyes.
Okay, so Chris, please send that to me if you can re-find it, because I will definitely repost that shit. If you have to relive that horror, so does our audience.
Yes, it's floating around. I'll find it. Stay tuned, audience,
Awesome.
for the social media. Cyclops is waiting for me.
So, like, my final thoughts about the show is that I know it's going to get better because we've had faith now. Every episode gets crazier than the last. For me personally, though, like, I'm good. Like, whatever happens from here on out, like, we saw one of the most dramatic episodes ever last time. We remember it. Storm fucking got her powers back, and a bonus. She got my favorite outfit out of it. And so, like, now I'm like, whatever happens from here, I'm just going to be content with. Like, I'm excited to see the show in general, but I'm not, like, anxious about specific elements. So... yeah, this is in my book a great episode. But like, what about last thoughts from you guys?
I mean, to your point about how the episodes are, like, it's wild to say this. It is rated an 8.1, and it is the second lowest episode with a 8.1. Like, that is fucking amazing. Like, and I was thinking about it earlier today. I think 92 is special to all of us, and I think some of the episodes suffer from having to be written as a Saturday morning kids cartoon that was helping sell toys. I think we've always known, especially those of us who've spent thousands of dollars on comics throughout the years, of how good these stories can be. And we don't need them to be rated R stories. We just need it to be for the audience that this is written for. And when they took those shackles off of the 92 world and gave us this one, that's why this all still works so well. Because they're not being gratuitous. They're just telling the story the way it should be told. And that's why I think if an 8.1 is your second lowest episode, that's pretty absurd in a good way.
For me, my final thoughts is I freaking love it. I feel like, we are in a new renaissance of Marvel and the X-Men. And this is just another episode that proves that. My only negative, I would say, is that I really wish that my nieces and nephew would be able to watch this, because they're, 10, 12, and they're just, the parents at their schools won't allow them to watch this new version of the X-Men because it's too intense. It's too sexy, it's too violent. And, hopefully when they become 14 and of age, they'll be able to dive into this and enjoy it too. But, for me, as a fan that grew up with it in the 90s, this is the storytelling that I want now. This is what we need now. And it's so, the Professor X's speech of just laying it out on the line and telling the audience, like, this is what's up, you guys. That's what's needed for our culture today, to hear these lessons. So I give it an A+. I give every single episode of X-Men 97 an A+, and I am so excited for more.
I just hope the season ends on a positive note. And the only reason I say it like that, and I think it will happen, is because when it was originally being written, they had only been approved for one season, as far as I know. And then after they had started the work on season 1 and it was going to animation, that was when they got approved for season 2. I think from a writer's perspective, if you are only guaranteed one season, you try not to do a cliffhanger, because we've seen what happens in X-Men when you end on a cliffhanger on your season that isn't renewed for another one. We haven't watched it yet, but we know that there's a pseudo cliffhanger in Evolution. We haven't watched it yet, but all I hear is about the cliffhanger from Wolverine and the X-Men. So I hope that this, even in the way that the original season wrapped up of 92, like, give us that button, and I think that we'll end on a high note. And, there's already the rumors swirling about, like, consideration of the third season and stuff like that. But, like, I just can't have another Genoshan genocide or massacre at the end of an episode again. Like, I'm not mentally able to do that right now.
Not going to put it past them.
Well, strap in, buddy, because from what I hear, episode 9 and 10 are a doozy.
See, I heard it was 8 that's the doozy, but who knows? Maybe they're all that bad.
Well, before we go, Chris, one more time, can we tell people where to find you and about the X Experience?
Yeah, well, if you want to hear X Reads the Podcast, you can follow us on social media at the letter X, READS podcast. And if you want to check out the Uncanny Experience, the immersive X-Men fan convention where you can meet the stars and creators of the X-Men universe, head on over to www.theuncannyexperience.com.
Very cool. Well, thanks for joining us. If you have any thoughts, make sure to drop them in the comments for either the YouTube upload or official Instagram post about this episode. If you like what you heard, we appreciate a rating on the podcast app you're choosing. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Spotify, YouTube Podcasts, and CastBox.
That's still a thing, I think. I haven't gotten an alert that's saying it's off, so.
Let's go make some eggs.